first priority, making sure that Iowa didn't receive any sort of windfall from the federal rebates that are going to go to individual Iowa taxpayers. And so we exempted individual Iowans from having their rebates from the federal economic stimulus package taxed, and that's going to hopefully create a stimulus, which is what it's intended to do. I will say that Iowa so far has resisted the national trend that is looking more and more bleak in terms of a potential recession. Receipts to the state of Iowa were up 13% yesterday over the previous year, and they've been hovering anywhere from 9 to 11% on average. So Iowa, because of our agricultural economy, is actually doing quite well this year, but we hope that this federal stimulus money that's coming to individual Iowa taxpayers will further create growth, stimulate the economy. On the other issue, we wanted to make sure that we were fiscally responsible because of the federal government, the way they accelerated bonus depreciation. If we were to fully couple with that, it would be a fairly large tax cut and have a fiscal impact of $15 million in 2009 and $40 million in fiscal year 2010. We decided that when we looked at it to make sure that we could afford it, that we would couple as it relates to Section 179, which means basically small businesses. And according to our numbers, 96% of Iowa businesses would classify for accelerated bonus depreciation, but it'd be something that the state of Iowa could afford because we want to be fiscally responsible. And so the rhetorical debate regarding tax increases, frankly, is just made up because the filings that a person files on their bonus depreciation are different, and it's not counted as income. So we need the deductibility issue. It's a separate filing. It's not counted as income. It would not be taxed. So that was something we were proud to do today. Next week will be Funnel Week, and to steal a joke from Mike Rostel, we hope to put the fun back in funnel. We're going to have a lot of committee work next week, and that's mostly what we'll do. We'll have very limited floor action. We do intend to take up one important piece of legislation for debate in the full House next week, and that is the Veterans Trust Fund lottery ticket, creating a new lottery ticket that has no fiscal impact to the state, but the estimates are it would generate over $3 million for the Veterans Trust Fund. And we look forward to debating that bill next week. But it's going to be mostly committee work.
What's on the to-do list or the must-do list for Funnel Week? Or what's going to fall off the table, do you think?
Well, I think, there's two things that are must-do for us next week. The first one is the healthcare reform. We do have, and I think we have a bipartisan agreement. We have Republicans working with Ro Faggy, Mark Smith, Lisa Heddens. We've got Representative Linda Upmeyer and Representative Walt Dominga that are working with our members. We think we will be able to have a fairly comprehensive package of 5 or 6 issues that they're working on. We expect that bill to be debated next Monday in Human Resources and voted out of that committee. It'll probably be done as a committee of the whole. So that'll be the first bill. The second bill that we definitely want done next week is immigration. We want to deal with the employer portion of that and the 1099 contracting piece. We think those are 2 major reforms that need to occur. And again, I would just reiterate that the only reason we're looking at this issue is Congress has failed to address this issue, so we're going to try to address it at the state level as best we can.
We're going to jump the idea of making people have an ID if they're not a state worker and work in Iowa.
You got the particulars? Go ahead.
This area is highly complicated. It's involved a tremendous amount of time analyzing the legalities of immigration law. Because what has occurred over the last couple of decades nationally has been really the reverse of NAFTA. Companies under NAFTA have been moving to Mexico for cheap labor. So where we may now save a dime on a bag of potato chips, we've lost several thousand American jobs. What the immigration issue has caused is kind of a reverse situation. The United States Chamber of Commerce and big corporations lobbied the United States Congress to limit states' ability and local government's ability to do something in the area of immigration. So they could bring cheap labor from Mexico up here to America. Okay, and then there's an added complication is that many of these companies are also now misclassifying their workers to further not pay into the system so they can have a steady flow of cheap labor. So we have to look at the federal law regarding what would be potentially preempted or not. And what the federal law says is a state or local government cannot directly enforce sanctions against corporate CEOs but they may do licensing or similar laws. Well, what does licensing or similar laws mean? This is where it gets fairly complicated. We have a federal court case because Arizona had a pretty draconian licensing system where your license to operate the business was yanked if you violated a particular law down there. So everyone,
Just once.
just once. So everyone would lose their jobs, and it created a pretty problematic situation down there. So we looked at the federal court challenge. United States Chamber of Commerce challenged, and big business groups challenged the Arizona law. The federal court said they were not preempted and they were okay. But in a very lengthy decision, it gave some instructive analysis for states that want to enter into this area. So what we are doing with our two actions in the bill, first, cracking down on corporate CEOs, we are moving in an indirect fashion that would not be preempted by federal law. And so that will require a state ID system, which we are totally within our right as police power of the state to do. And a company executive would have to sign under penalty of perjury that their information is correct, just like they sign under penalty of perjury when they file their state income taxes. So the potential penalty, if it's found later through a whistleblower or an accountant in the company or something, that they were knowingly skirting the law, they could be subject to a perjury charge of up to 5 years in prison. So that is the first action of the bill, and we believe that will make us in compliance with federal law, and let's make sure we're not preempted. The second action of the bill is worker misclassification, which we talked about, making sure that if you've got an employee that is treated as a full-time employee, in other words, it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, you better have them on the radar screen, paying into taxes, paying into workers' comp. Because what's happening right now is they're below the radar screen, a lot of them, so when they get injured, when they get hurt, they're dispendable or disposable, and you can bring another batch of cheap labor up here. That's wrong. It's a violation of human rights in our view, and we're trying to do this to make sure that people aren't being abused.
So no contractor, you want them to be full-time employee?
If they are treated as a full-time employee, they should be.
They have to legitimately be a 1099 contract. For example, if I'm working with Kevin and I have a 1099 contract, but he tells me, Pat, you have to be to work at 8 o'clock every day. Pat, you take your lunch break at noon. Pat, you go home at 5 o'clock. Oh, Pat, it rained today, or it's bad weather today, you stay home. An independent contractor would be able to set his own schedule and wouldn't have to be there at all the hours that they're contracting with, and be told to go home, when to go home, and told, oh, today's bad weather, you stay home. They said that's really a skirting of the law, and so it is a reform that needs to occur.
I just want to show something here, because the Iowa Association of Business and Industry, never been accused of being an ally of the Democratic Party, but as this debate is now transpiring in the legislature, it has kind of exposed really the real issue behind the immigration laws that Iowans are showing that they're very concerned about. I noticed the recent Iowa poll in the Register, 86% of Iowans are supporting the House Democrats' proposal to go after corporate CEOs. 69% support the Republicans. Those are both strong numbers. No other item polled greater on any subject matter in the Iowa poll. And so the Association of Business and Industry published this magazine here, as you can see, Immigration Fueling Iowa's Economy. I'm assuming that they're not referring to legal immigration, since we have legal immigration in this country. I'm assuming they're referring to illegal immigration. And Iowans are saying they want that stopped. They want the abuse of people to stop. They want corporate CEOs who are getting cheap labor and driving down wages to stop. And federal government has an act. We're going to try to do something in a responsible way and in a humane and civil way. And this kind of reminds me, this is kind of apples and oranges, but the human side of this is important to keep in mind. Let me just ask a rhetorical question. If you were to ask a grandparent, would you like your 15-year-old granddaughter to get pregnant? Would that be something you'd like? I think every grandparent would say, no, that would be something that would be bad for a whole host of reasons. But if you ask the grandparent 6 years later, do you regret your 6-year-old grandchild now that you're here and you're celebrating holidays and you have a human being here? You regret that you have this 6-year-old grandchild? They say, absolutely not. It would be abhorrent to think that I would not have this wonderful grandchild. It's a blessing from God. And anyway, in the immigration law, what comes first, the chicken or egg? We do have human beings here. They need to be treated with humanity and respect. We have to recognize that there are people that have come here that have been abused, and there's a human side to it, and we have to really recognize that. We also have to recognize that we don't want the 15-year-old to get pregnant. In other words, we don't want the future abuse of workers to come up here and have them work for slave wages, and that's kind of the focus of what we're trying to do.
Other questions?